Today, we are facing despots who use national security and classification to push everything under a blanket of secrecy, to gag and call it a privilege.
For those in power, the obvious advantage of keeping people in fear is that they are less likely to question what you then do to them, purportedly in the name of their own security. The hidden but perhaps greater advantage is that if any of them do ask you what you're doing, you can reply, "Can't tell you," because that could compromise your security.
They are saying that whole information, everything, is classified.
Thus has the Bush administration not only eavesdropped illegally on Americans, but it is also hidden behind the state secrets claim when its illegal wiretaps have been challenged in court. In our fourth story tonight, a top Republican is teaming up with no less than Senator Ted Kennedy to strip Mr. Bush of that protection. The Associated Press reporting that Republican Senator Arlen Specter is working on legislation to change the current system in which civil lawsuits against the Bush administration are routinely killed because the administration claims the suits would expose state secrets.
My focus has been exposing the criminal activities where money laundering, narcotic activities, and nuclear black market converge with terrorist activities.
Kennedy and Specter's proposed law, judges in these cases would be instructed to evaluate the administration's claim for secrecy rather than just accept it at face value, as many, if not most, do now.
In fact, this particular judge had one line saying, "I know this is draconian, but who am I to argue with the government on matters related to national security?"
On the premise that this might become law somehow, let's turn to constitutional law scholar Jonathan Turley, professor at George Washington University. John, good evening.
Hi, Keith.
Am I wrong about this? I mean, if you strip the politics away somehow from this and you asked every American about this topic, wouldn't they assume that this already was a law, that the government has to make at least some token effort to justify acting in secret against its own citizens?
Well, it actually is the law. You know, this has been a distortion or a mutation of the law. The privilege has become something that I think the Supreme Court never imagined when it first created it in a case called Reynolds. They stated in Reynolds they expected judges to try to minimize the scope of the privilege. But today, the privilege is used primarily not to keep something secret, but to keep something from being used against the government.
They would do anything to ensure that this information did not become public.
I was in a courtroom when people laughed when the government counsel argued that they could use the privilege to claim as secret something that was published on the cover of the New York Times.
3 years after the Senate and the House Judiciary Committees looked into my case and made some statements, and this was, these were statements made to the public, for CBS 60 Minutes, the Washington Post, about the fact that this is a credible case. Yes, FBI needs to be turned upside down. This is a major case with really serious implications. 3 years after they made these statements, in May 2004, the Attorney General sent an order to the Congress saying the Justice Department retroactively is classifying everything these senators and congressmen had said about me, because the case is a state secrets privilege case, is classified, and what was public before, after 3 years, the Justice Department says now we decided that this information is also classified. So we call it retroactive classification.
That's how grotesque the privilege has become.
Hence that phrase laughed out of the court.
And at this point, the three-panel judges, they said, thank you very much. Now we are going to ask you, the plaintiff and the attorneys for the plaintiff, to step out, because the government is going to argue its case. Actually, we were escorted. The guards, the court, they escorted us out, and they locked the doors. The government's attorneys argued the case. I don't know. We don't know what they told the judges. They were all classified. As far as we know, they could go and give the most outrageous lies. We assume that they did.
I have been in cases where the government was most clearly and certainly lying to the court, and the court did nothing to look at whether that allegation was true. And I think that's why congressional action is so needed here. But Keith, if I could get one wish granted, it would probably be this, that we could put this genie back in the bottle in terms of the privilege and allow citizens to sue their government to prove things like crimes. If you look back at history, most of the great reforms were not brought forth by Congress or presidents. They were brought forth by citizens standing up to the government.
You will see several criminal prosecutions in this country.
The privilege is now a tool used to protect the government from its own crimes.
The attacks on our freedom are from within, from our very own government, and unless we recognize these attacks for what they are and stand up and speak out, no, shout out against those despots in government, then we are doomed to wake up one sad morning and wonder when and where our freedom died.